All right, welcome everybody. My name's Kate Williams, and this is the Plugged In session, the future of electric vehicles, and we're going to talk about a lot of other stuff as well. I know that this is like the perfect day to be out here. We definitely invite you to this blanket right up here, not spoken for. You can come sit right here, hang out, be close to these amazing people. So please, have a drink. Get yourself closer. We do know that there's a lot of pleasant distractions, but we hope that by gazing at the setting sun while listening, it will just be that much better of a learning experience, and we're going to have a great conversation and keep you awake. So thank you all for being here, and thanks to the Sea Change team for ordering up really the perfect weather day. For everyone who is a new or native Vermonter, you know that this is kind of one in a million. So we're super grateful to get to be out here having a great conversation on a great day. So with that, we'll get started. Again, I'm Kate Williams. I'm CEO of 1% for the Planet. We're based here out of Hula. We are a global nonprofit. We engage businesses, many of you here, Wind and Waves is a member who are giving back to environmental nonprofits. And we're really interested in what businesses are doing across all of their activities, not just philanthropy, but the other ways in which they're driving change. So really looking forward to this conversation. And so the framing for this conversation, so you can get psyched about what to expect here, is that we have two amazing people here. We have Sam Bruneau, who's the CEO and founder of Taiga, and we have Kyle Clark, who's the CEO and founder of Beta. Sam is down here. This is his first time in Burlington from Montreal, so give him a warm welcome. There still is no one sitting on this blanket. Come on down. And Kyle, as many of you know, Beta is based here at Hula, awesome, plus lots of other places in Vermont and Montreal. So we're psyched about that. So let's just go through the checklist here. Kyle and Sam are both innovators, correct?
We try to be.
Try to be. Okay, so innovators. Sam and Kyle are both engineers. All right. Sam and Kyle are both entrepreneurs and leaders. And Sam and Kyle both want to change the world. Okay, so those are four distinct skills. A lot of people do one of those things. So part of what we're going to be talking about in the context of electrification is bringing all those skills together to have the amazing companies that they're building. So with that, I'm going to start us off by turning it over to these awesome individuals and have them each introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into some questions. There will be time for your Q&A, so definitely think about what you're curious about, what I'm not asking about that you want to know more about, because we want to hear from you. All right, Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me here. So I'm Sam Bruneau, CEO, co-founder of Taiga, and what Taiga does is we're trying to accelerate the electrification in this new category of off-road vehicles. So electric watercraft that we have here with us today, these four beautiful units, and that's what we're doing down here in Burlington. We have a bit of a media event going on. We just launched deliveries, so these are the first ever production electric watercraft in the world, trying to get sustainable access to the waterways across North America. And in the wintertime, we build 100% electric snowmobiles that we started delivering last winter here in Vermont and up in Canada as well.
Wait a second, can we just underline how amazing that is, that these are the first ones and they're here on our lake? So thank you, that's really awesome.
Awesome, thanks Sam, and welcome to Vermont. Thrilled to have you here and what you're doing. My name's Kyle Clark. I think I know most of the people here, fortunately. I'm the CEO and founder, for those that don't know, of Beta Technologies. I fancy myself an engineer and a pilot at times, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that type of mindset within our businesses and what it may, or from our experience or my experience, mean to be a founder and what it means to develop a technology and a business around that technology in a place that we care about. So I'm Kyle and thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Great, and let's start right there, because I would guess that for both of you, engineering is, if not top of the list, sort of how you came into this work, then at least pretty high on the list. So maybe Kyle, let's start with you. How did and does being an engineer shape your path to coming into beta, and then if you want to get into sort of how it leads you to lead right now, that would be great to hear that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody who majors or focuses on a particular area obviously has a lot of pride about it. I have a lot of pride about being an engineer and have an affinity to engineers. But if I really reflect from the outside and look at it, I'll go back to a story when I was graduating from college. We had 8 people in the material science and applied math class. 6 of them went to Wall Street. And I looked at it kind of funny. So why are they going to Wall Street? Why are they getting so heavily recruited? And only 2 of us went into real engineering, or engineering that I believe is real. And it was because those engineers who went to Wall Street, they had a knack for analytical thinking. And it was not, how do you bake a box of brownies? How do you follow the instructions to get the output of that box of brownies? It was, how do I think about this problem? And how does the first principles, fundamental physics of a problem, go from thermals to mechanicals to electrical to fluids? And how do I understand how those things work together? And then how do I apply that to what we call constructive mathematical models within beta that are both business challenges and technical challenges? So my point there is that I think that you can take an engineer or be an engineer and learn how to do businesses with the tools that you have as an engineer. I've never seen a really good business person or salesperson say, I can use those tools to go and design a product. So I think that it can go in that direction if you're willing and able to apply those models and that constructive thinking into business. And I think that gives you a slight edge. Never mind the fact in technical businesses, you have to have a good technical product. And to kind of separate the good from the bad, the decisions on the technical end, and not get bamboozled, you have to have at least a passable level of technical understanding in our domains.
And you're welcome to say pass on this question, but it'd be great to hear, is there an example, a really concrete example of when that engineering mindset led to a business solution and a time when that engineering mindset was not the right thing to guide a solution? So one of each, if possible.
Let me think about that while Sam answers.
Okay, all right. So Sam, let's hear from you. How has being an engineer informed how you started your company and lead it?
I think for many of the reasons Kyle just said, a similar philosophy. Overall, for me, engineering is, how can you make something better? Obviously, a lot of people default to that's, math, it's physics, and that's what engineering is. But for me, it kind of encompasses, like Kyle said, beyond just the pure physics of engineering. It's how can you build a better product? How can you build a better company or a better system to do things? And that's how we built this company. And it was, how can you build a better jet ski? You make it electric, but it encompasses a lot of other things, and it encompasses as well how it looks, how people interact with it, how it rides, and then how people interact with the business itself. So it's taking all those variables at play and then using a really data-driven approach to try and make decisions. So, drive in some engineering methodologies across the line to build the business. And I think that's what's really defined Taiga in its early days and how we grew it.
And Kyle, are you ready?
I think I'm ready with a
Okay,
conceptual
so
idea.
You should be preparing your
prepare for
idea.
this one. It's hard. It's hard. So I'll start with the latter, which is where can two logical or an engineering mind undermine your ability to be successful as an entrepreneur. And the obvious one is getting too deep into the details of the business on the technical level and trying to reach down into the product or the design teams at a level that doesn't let them do their job. The other one is that you can, because you know that the problem can be solved, and I'm a perpetual optimist, which makes me a little Pollyannish about like how hard it is to solve a problem. You can see the steps at the superficial level, and you just look at a group of engineers or an engineer and you say, why can't you solve that? And you get to the point where that technical challenge may undermine your ability to make a pragmatic decision. So then I'll go back to the former, which is the art of engineering is deciphering the parameters of a problem that matter and those that don't matter. And when you do analytical work, typically, the first step of that problem, it says, what are the gazintas that will really affect the outcome or the requirements of the product you're trying to develop? And sometimes those are non-obvious. And so being an engineer allows you to look at a business through the same light. And when you think about, well, what are the key things? Well, number one, don't run out of money. That's a really important input. Number two, get all the tools or the people or the resources to pull a business together. And then when you start to say, okay, well, I've got money, I've got good people, I've got a good vision or values in the business, those to me are like the really key parameters to the engineering problem. It's not, do I have a fancy logo? Do I have t-shirts? Do I have hats that match the t-shirts? Do I have, and like these things that have this super, thank you, Katie, for pointing out my t-shirt. I have a Beta t-shirt for those that can't see. Those superficial things that when we look into a successful business, you say, oh, well, what does Elon Musk do? Or what did Steve Jobs do? And you see these superficial things, and you're not thinking analytically, well, what are the underlying tenets that allowed them to be successful? Not the fact that Steve Jobs wore a black shirt every day. It was the fact that he thought in a particular way. So deciphering those superficial business things that have the appearance of leading to success versus the cores that do. And that's like an engineering problem.
That's great. And it's also great words to live by, whether you're an engineer or not, like what does matter and what doesn't matter, and how are you determining that? So thank you. That's awesome. How about you? What are some tangible examples of the engineering mind coming to life for you?
I think it's always a bit the duality of we can do stuff better and reinvent things, but then also having to be careful of not going too far and not reinventing things that are already really great. And we've had several examples of that in our history. We started really from a clean sheet, and a lot of it was great. You know, we reinvented how to do certain different things with the snowmobiles and the watercraft, but we also, you know, went a step too far and tried to reinvent things that we really shouldn't have touched. And in the early days, we made some mistakes like that. So it's easy when you have a team at the beginning of really only engineers to start geeking out about the problem, more than asking, do we really even need to be doing this? Is any customer going to care about it? And we spent a lot of time on some really silly things at the beginning. And I think that comes with maturity as a company and analyzing more from a business sense to balance a bit the purely engineering minds at the company.
I was listening to a podcast, Hidden Brain, which I kind of feel is like lower than the two of you, but I love Hidden Brain. But it was just this week about the fact that as engineers, and as humans, our tendency is not to subtract, but to add, and that often the best solutions require subtraction, but that's very hard to see. So what you were just saying made me think of that. So that's great. So expanding the ways in which you as engineers, but also as more than engineers, lead your companies, how do you approach hiring and building culture, which in my experience at least is, you know, definitely as art as well as science/engineering. So I'd love to hear how you do that, because both of you have grown relatively large staffs, and I'm sure that they're not all engineers, not all working on direct engineering problems, and also you need for them to cohere as a group to get you towards your goal. So be great. Maybe we'll start with you this time. You ready? Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think first and foremost, when you're building a company, the people, everything, you know, you can't do anything as one or a few people to build a product like this. And it's really defined by finding the right people to help build the best product. And you go through phases, and you know, initially it's very engineering heavy, and you're trying to build really design the best product. And then once you start getting there, you got to be expanding into different groups of the company, because it becomes really an overall optimization process where you need great marketing. If you want to sell the best product, you got to sell a lot of them to be able to get the money to reinvest in the product and make the product better, which means you need everything in the company to work seamlessly together. So we really try and find people, the best people we can, that are motivated behind the mission to be able to go out and make the world a better place in a small way, and build these amazing products.
Yeah, I'd echo that and build on it with some more very specific, I would say, rules that we implement early implemented early. The first is the recognition that no one person can do everything. They may have even the skills to do everything, but they don't have the time or the ability or the resources. So that leads you to the conclusion that in order to build a company, you've got to convince people to be a part of what you're doing, and/or they already have to be pre-convinced, and you need to recognize those people. And that requires that you do things to the extent possible in public. And if you do things in private and you're always sitting there saying, I've got a really good idea, but I can't tell you what it is. Well, you better have a lot of money, be really smart, and have a lot of time to do anything with that idea. So the first step is like being transparent enough so people can either find you or you can express your idea to them. And then you say, what are the people that you want to find? And I apologize for some of the people that have heard me say this before, but we look for a common passion with a complementary skill set. And it's not just a singular passion. In our business, it's technology, sustainability, and aviation. You're insatiably, you just can't get enough. Like this kid right here, Jeremy, he's awesome. You can't get in front of him if there's a curiosity that he wants to solve out in front of him. And he loves aviation, technology and aviation. I don't know where you stand on sustainability, but I think it's important to you. So you got all three. And if you have two out of those three, mathematically, back to the engineering mind, then everybody will share a common passion. So we resolved that we all care about the same thing. And at every interview, we try to extract that. Do you really care about something? Is that something aligned with our business? And then the next step is, do you have a complementary skill set? And that skill set isn't just like limited to, are you a good accountant? You good on Excel or whatever? That skill set is of course, can you do the technical job that you're asked to do? But can you make the people around you better? Can you assimilate with them at least at a flat level? And more importantly, and this is where the really valuable people are, they can pull people up around them into the next notch of success. And if you've got all three of those things, you've got people who wanted to be here, you want them there. They've got a complementary skill set with a common passion. You start to build this nucleus. And then the last kind of secret portion of that is that it turns out that smart people want to work with smart people. So you can have that, in math, it's a positive feedback system, right? The more you have in either direction. You have shitty people, more positive people, more positive people. Try to get those kernels early and do whatever's necessary through equity, enticement, investment in time and effort to get those people that people want to work with. And we were super lucky that the first 5-6 people that came to Beta, and a lot of people know these folks that founded former companies in town. They just were like magnets for more smart people. And it made that whole cycle work well.
That's great. I really appreciate how detailed that is. And one of the terms that
That's code for I talk too much.
No. That's code for way to apply engineering to something that I think of in a more artistic way. One of the things that comes to mind is in our, at 1% for the Planet, we talk about impact players, that everyone's striving to be an impact player, meaning you do a really awesome job in your area and you make the work lighter for everyone else. Like those are the two components. And we all have to create the conditions for people to be impact players. So just sharing that as a way that we frame it. Tell us about your hiring and how you manage that.
Yeah, I think that goes through a lot of different phases in the company, but it's about finding just like wicked smart people that are passionate about building the company, and that really feeds everything. If you have those two things together, you can get around and almost any problem. And it's finding people with a great attitude, because I think startups they're difficult, and you go through a lot of highs and lows, and there's daily challenges, and you need people that won't become down from those challenges, and it's kind of like part of the job, and they're excited about facing a new challenge and building something new and getting to the next step. So it's really about finding the right cultural mix, and you need a bit of everything in the company, which is the really tricky part about hiring and building a startup. Is there's no magic formula about this personality type will work. You need a good mix to create a balance, to get new ideas in. You want a lot of creativity in the company. So that's what we try and do, and it's pulling people from different fields. We build electric vehicles, power sport vehicles, but we really try and pull people from every different industry to get a good mix of ideas, and that really is what fuels innovation.
Yeah, that just kind of spurs a funny little comment that it took me a while to understand, and then how it's said differently, less eloquently. And the last time I think I spoke at this, it was with Martine. And she would often say, if you had 10 scientists that were all very bright and understood the problem well, and 9 of them said you couldn't do it, you couldn't solve the problem, and 1 of them said you could, she would always trust the one that said you could. And at first you're like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's hard to be the one that reaches out and says, you can solve that problem. And that perpetual optimism, almost to a point where like, oh, good luck with that. You want those people in an early stage business. And so the second part of that story is a guy we recently hired. And he said something that made me kind of stop and pause and smile. And an engineer said, hey, that's not possible. And he looked at him and said, not with that attitude. And it was just a really like clear dig on, yeah, it's not about whether it's technically possible. We can debate that all day long. But without the ability to think that it's possible, to go and try it, it clearly is impossible.
Yeah, 100% no chance of success if you say it's not possible, right? That's great, and great to hear about that. Now, let's talk about like that optimism and the fact of the challenges. So both of you are essentially creating companies that are setting out to change industries. And I know you may have started, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of what I'm sort of taking to be true here, but you started maybe with a more narrow interest on the particular technology that you are wanting to transform, but in so doing, you are transforming your respective industries, which is a hard thing to do. So talk about sort of how you kind of face some of the inevitable, I would imagine, setbacks and challenges, and keep that sort of optimistic focus on the long horizon while also kind of addressing the brutal facts of the present.
Yeah, I think to come back to what Kyle said about perpetual optimism and building a company, you really need a good balance between everything. And that's what allowed us to start Taiga. So I co-founded it with two other engineers, and we were on kind of a scale of optimism to pessimism. And I'm like the really eternal optimist that think anything is possible. And then, the two others get more and more practical. And that's what really allows us to, question each other and have a healthy debate. And that's what's needed to be able to find the best idea. If everyone's just really optimistic, you're going to have a great culture initially, but everything will go wrong. And if you're all pessimists, then you'll not take risks and build something that's new that no one else is doing. So it's really finding that balance in the culture of the company, and it's not an easy thing. It creates some heated debates sometimes when people want to try something that's impossible versus someone that thinks it's not. But that's what really fuels innovation. So I think that's been the key, a big key to our success.
Yeah, and this may be a little bit off topic, but inevitably in developing a complex business, a product, you're going to hit roadblocks where everybody looks at each other and says, "Oh shit, what do we do now?" Like there's a fundamental issue with supply chain, technology, people, whatever. And one of the ways to break through that I find is both humbling and effective is if a leader or somebody in the business that's respected walks into a room where there's a block and starts offering bad ideas. And because there's no ideas to get us out of the hole, starts offering bad ideas. There's holes in the ideas that you're offering, and people first think you're kind of dumb, and then they see the strategy, because then they start to catalyze their own ideas around those and tell you why they're bad, which results in a better way to solve the problem. And in hard technical problems, like I for a while, I had a highlighted schematic above my desk from a friend of mine, Chip Palambini, who would remind me of the bad idea that I put on the table to tell me I was an idiot. But it was strategically placed. It wasn't really, but I'm going to say it was. But the point is that when something becomes really hard, like catalyze the thinking as opposed to try and solve the problem, because that's the first step in solving the problem, especially when it's multidisciplinary and there's a lot of people involved, and get people talking about it and force the design or force the concept. And even in financing a business, if you kind of sit and wait and say, geez, how are we going to pitch this business? You never get to the point of refining your pitch. What I find works is you just start putting yourself out there, either internally or sometimes externally, and take those arrows and that feedback. And I talked to Russ at length about this in our A round, 86 pitches before somebody bit. That's like a lot. That's a lot of hours, because remember, every hour-long pitch you're preparing for 4 or 5 hours beforehand, and so you get all these questions and critiques, either formally or informally, and it helps refine the way that you can talk about your business or solve a problem. But you have to be willing to look like an idiot for a minute.
And be tenacious, clearly, which is great. And one thing, just to build on that, I have a board member who would always sort of press on the idea of there are no good ideas or bad ideas. There are just ideas that you test and find out. And that is really liberating when people can kind of step into that, like me thinking in my head and sort of shaping ideas and not saying it until I think it's a really good idea is really limiting. So as you were saying, getting it out there, and even the next step of testing it. And obviously you can't invest in testing everything, but you got to have some failures in the market to see what might work.
Yeah, maybe just a compliment on that. I think it's really important, and it's not advertised enough in the startup space, like how many failures it takes to get to success, not just on, pitching investors, which is, it's the success ratio is so small, like thousands of terrible pitches before getting to where you want to go. And it's about just keeping the eye on the final objective and not doubting that you can end up there. And it's the same thing with product development. And people see often the startups at the end when they're successful, and that's when they get all the media. And everyone thinks, oh, I can just get from an idea to a great company without any huge failures. But it's impossible, and it's exactly about that. It's about the iteration. It's about the small steps and keeping people on track, kind of eyes on the prize, and doing that process. And especially in product development, watercraft, planes, it takes a lot of iterations before converging to something that really works.
I will share one more story on that, where I remember we were doing our Series A, which is 2 rounds back now, and the Goldman rep that was working with us, he said, when did you know, or how did you know that we were going to get this done? Like there was this light bulb. I'm like, no, I knew it from the beginning. They're all idiots. It took them a long time to understand what I was trying to say, which was kind of exposing of that perpetual optimism. You knew, and you have to walk into it knowing that this, and have absolute surety, because any weakness in your own conviction is immediately exposed.
But let's get real for a minute. Did you each at some point have like a dark night of the soul? Like, was it pitch number 71 or something like that? Because I think, for many of you and, many of us, were either starting something or continuing to build something, and I know you're still working really hard, and in certain ways you've arrived. So help us to see into that process. Like, how did you stay optimistic when maybe you had moments of like, will this actually happen?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think partially it's just luck. Genetically, I'm optimistic.
You block it out later.
Or something. But in general, I think it's 2 things. It's really loving the problem more than the solution. Like, you have to love the day-to-day challenge. It's a bit like being an athlete. Winning a marathon is not done just by showing up to the race and going. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of effort, but you have to love running to do it. And it's a bit the same thing with a startup. You got to love that everyday challenge, everyday problem solving, and then it doesn't become a huge effort. When you have a setback, it's kind of part of the journey, and it's kind of fun to find a solution to that setback. So that's what's really helped me kind of get that in the line. And I don't think there was ever a day where I thought, oh shit, this is not possible. I think it's more maybe just sometimes you're angry. They're like, why is no one getting it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I was just kind of reminiscing in the back of my brain here about times that like I would have crossed that threshold to not believe it could be done. And I genuinely can't think of a time when I thought, well, we're not going to get this done. Unquestionably, there were times, and Katie will attest to this, where I come home and just incredibly frustrated with either progress or some other like aspect of the business, or concerned, like genuinely concerned about like a problem that was discovered that day in the aerostructure, the propulsion system, or the batteries, and you're like, oh man, this is going to be a real hard one. And the thing that immediately revert to, okay, and this may be to your first question, like, all right, how do I solve this problem? and you start deconstructing it into the points where, okay, I got to convince these people to believe that we can solve it. And those may be board members, they may be investors. I got to convince these people that it can be solved as well, and they may be some of your pessimistic brethren. And then you start picking away at the pieces to get there, knowing that you can find the surface if you kind of dissect it into pieces. But I don't think globally I've ever come to the point where I said, this can't be done, or I'm out.
That's awesome, and that's why you're both here, where you are with your companies, so that's really great to hear. We've sort of talked around innovation a little bit, both of you brought it up, but I'd love to just hear, like, how would you define innovation, and in what ways is what you are doing innovative, in what ways do you maybe not think of it as innovative? Just love to dig into that. We use that term a lot, and it'd be great to dig in.
That's a big question. I think for me, innovation is being able to kind of push the boundaries and do something better. It can be anything. It can be product, it can be business. And that's really what innovation is about, is how can I, move the notch forward one other step and make something better that's out there. And that comes in many forms. And that's what we try and do every day.
Yeah, I think kind of by definition, and I don't know how innovation is defined, but when you say the word, and I like this flow, by the way, where you answer first and I get to think. The innovation is actually doing something that the majority believed couldn't be done, or in a way that most people didn't think of. So you're already identifying yourself with a minority and some thinking that is non-obvious before you can call it innovative, right? And our innovation, like when I think about innovation within the company, in engineering, and I think I've talked about this a little bit as well, is that when you define a problem, you see the obvious elements of that solution, maybe the big pieces. But then as you solve the problem, you solve the secondary and tertiary problems that you created by solving the first problem. So you've got 6 things you're trying to solve. Keep it hot, or keep it cold, keep it strong, make it fast. And you're like, okay, well, I know how to do that. I put a big motor on it, put a lot of cooling, and put some structure in there. In doing so, you say, oh, geez, I just need now bigger wheels to hold up all that weight. And all of a sudden you have 4 problems and 5 problems. Then your problem gets really big. But you finish the problem and you have a solution. And by definition, you have a solution, you have no longer a problem. But it's not the most elegant solution. And it's this big cycle of more and more solutions to the problems you created until you make the widget at the speed you expect it to. But you've got conveyor belts and robots and all this stuff. And then the hard part about innovation, this is where I think real innovation happens, and you mentioned simplicity, and sometimes the solution that we want to seek is a simpler solution. Then you start whittling away, and this is where it takes, you break from mental inertia and you say, I'm going to question myself, I'm going to self-litigate against the solutions I've already made to make them simpler and simpler and simpler and simpler. And then the art of the business is to say, I'm going to asymptotically approach some point where it's the minimum minimorum of the product I'm developing. How many molds does it take to make that thing? 50 molds? Well, wouldn't it be better if it was 49, right? But is it worth it to go to 49? And if it's going to take you twice as long to get one less mold, it doesn't make sense to do it. And that's where the art of the business kind of cuts that off and says, okay, release. But if you released up here, you're forever tied to an overly complex system, although you do have a solution. So the shape that I'm drawing is complexity versus time, and there's an asymptotic approach to something that goes on forever, and then you end up just being an academic. Sorry.
You've been waiting to get that in. We succeeded.
I just thought of it.
I did notice that you looked up when you heard the airplane. Do you look up every time you hear something?
I didn't notice that I did, but probably. Yes, my wife says yes.
Oh, I didn't know your wife was in the crowd. Where are you?
Say hi.
All right. Are we getting truth so far here? Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Did you answer that one? Yeah, you did. You went first on that. Okay, so on to our next one. Breakthroughs do you believe in them, and have you had them? And we've talked about this a little bit, but I think a lot of people do associate some like moment of turning the corner. And I'd just like to hear about that. And if you do believe in them and you had one, tell us about it.
I think there's no like single major breakthrough. It's really a lot of minor breakthroughs, and you definitely have that like hooray feeling. This is an amazing idea that comes through. But it's a lot of those small ones to get to the final solution. I can't think of a time in Taiga's history where, there's one point that defines the whole company. It's a lot of different points along the journey that allows you to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, I think that the breakthrough for our company is interesting, and it's a good analogy is when we were down in Puerto Rico surfing, and Russ and Chuck were out on a huge break, and I caught a wave, and I'm like, I caught that wave, and Chuck says, no, that wave caught you, and that's how I feel with this business. This business, I was wanted to get into aviation, understood power electronics. We're trying to put that together in all these different forms, and along comes this big wave of financing and acuteness to sustainability and all these things that we kind of caught this wave, or it caught us. This wave caught us and said, hey, you have the brewings of something that makes sense with this kind of big realization or transformation of thinking around energy. And then you're like, whoa, hey, now I'm standing up. Now how do I navigate this thing? And so that breakthrough for us is kind of weak. It's kind of a weenie breakthrough. It wasn't like an epiphany, but it was being prepared to some extent when the wave came, and just being passionate about that thing that you believe, and then looking around and trying to figure out if you have the right elements to make that happen. And then back to that self-litigating, to make sure that you have those corrections and you don't just get hard-headed in a particular direction. And I could go into detail as how our business did that, but at the very highest level, well, everybody was over circling this light bulb of passenger air taxi. We kind of quietly had this self-realization when we thought that was the direction we were going to go initially. And we said, no. The wave is bigger over here in cargo and logistics. It's bigger in medical cargo and logistics. And we caught a much bigger wave than everybody else. And it wasn't just dumb luck and we just happened to be there. We recognized where we were on the wave and we turned in the right direction. The other part of a breakthrough, back to kind of the team, is that like the breakthroughs that we've had as a company are, technologically anyway, are not a singular person walking in and holding up a notebook that they wrote down something at 2 a.m. and said, I did it. I solved the problem. It's never like that. It's somebody coming in and testing an idea and then finding a little resonance here, and then that group testing the idea sideways and finding a little more resonance. Then all of a sudden you kind of perturb a few thinkings that are happening within the company to say, wow, we can totally transform something. And we did that when we converted, or we went from flying an 8-rotor thrust vectoring aircraft to a 5-rotor non-thrust vectoring, simpler and much more beautiful aircraft. And I remember that kind of brewing and then cracking through, but it wasn't a singular individual. Again, it was a group of people, kind of all realized it at the same time.
That's great. I love that. And it does seem like so much of life is that when we're open to it and mindful of it, is like planning plus serendipity and being able to kind of move into that space. All right, we are going to almost move into questions, so be consolidating those in your heads, and we will have a mic going around, so just know that that's coming in a minute. But both of you are doing like really big, important work, and I'm sure that you invest a lot of yourselves in it. And how do you recharge, other than having a conversation in the sunshine on this day with these amazing people?
I think from a work perspective, benefit of these kind of products is when you get to go out and interact with them. They're just so much fun to try to get to go out in the water or be on a beach or be on a snowmobile trail up in the mountains. So that's always amazing. I think the thing that's most recharging for me when I'm on the job is when we get out and have people try it out, experience the vehicle and they come back and they're so excited and they love the ride, that kind of like fulfills the whole reason why we started the company. So that's super exciting. And then on a personal level, I think it's the same thing. It's just how can I spend more time outdoors, which is the reason I kind of made this company.
Yeah, my answer is really crappy. I haven't felt the need to recharge. It feels like if you get to the point where you just like you get excited about every new challenge in the business. And I'm fortunate enough that my family's in the business as well, so I don't feel like I'm taking anything away from that. So the charging for me is going in and solving hard problems and flying. And I mean, Jeremy and I recharged for lunch today. We went up and did aerobatics for an hour. And like, I guess as I'm saying that, I realize that those keep you connected to the why, in the lab or in the meeting rooms. Maybe things can get a little draggy because they're not all interesting problems to solve. So staying connected to the why in the business, I would find it hard to believe that, and maybe this is really naive and a negative thing to say, but that somebody would start a business, be in it, having a bunch of fun and being like, I got to get away from this. I remember very early on, we had a venture capitalist come in and he put a map down on the table and he showed me about 40 steps through the map. And he goes, show me where you want to get off. Like, show me when this exit is. And his name was Andy. And I was like, Andy, listen, man, I really appreciate that, but I wouldn't be here if I wanted to leave here. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, there is no exit strategy. Like, I'm not trying to turn this into something different. If I wanted something different, I'd go do something different. Like this is what we want to do. And as a lot of people here know, we had tons of opportunities to go public. We had opportunities to take investment from entities that were going to drive us in a particular direction, particular strategics. And we decided not to do that because we like what we do or love what we do. And so this whole idea of like recharging away from something that you're nominally interested in is confusing to my little brain.
Well, what I'm hearing is that you're like a renewable energy source, which is so perfect. And that's great. And I think that is really great thing for all of us to see on the horizon is like, how do you find the things that are your work, but that also are your sort of energy source as well, and so that you don't need to go recharge from them. That's awesome. It's a great note to end this part on. So with that, we're going to go to questions from the audience. And I always have more questions. So if you don't, these lovely people are not off the hook, but we'd love to hear your questions.
First off, thank you guys so much for this. This is awesome. And I want to go take one of those out. I think that would be fun. You guys talked a lot about optimism, and like I love being an optimist. It's super fun. It's a fun way to live life and wake up every morning thinking things are possible and believing that. And also, though, there has to be an element of realism, of recognizing that there are massive challenges that you guys have to overcome in order to be successful. And so there has to be some element of, realism and pessimism that says, here are the real challenges, but I believe we can solve them. And I think sometimes I struggle if I get, overwhelming negative feedback. Like, let's say from fundraising, you had whatever it was, 85 pitches before you actually got somebody to bite. So how do you balance both believing in your optimism, but also hearing and listening to the feedback and believing that the feedback and the challenges that you're seeing are real? How do you balance that and decide when it's the right time to be a realist or an optimist?
I think right in the middle is pragmatism. Like you've got this like pessimism and what we call realism, which realism is constantly changing, so it's kind of a weird word. It's pragmatism. It's like I optimistically see this can be done, and sometimes you can take this super aggressive, optimistic approach to solving that problem, but many times you just say, what is the pragmatic approach? And I was out in LA at this Abundance 360 where they're looking for exponential technologies, and people were talking about hyper exponentials, where exponential is on top of exponential, and I just think that's kind of crap because at some point you're making exponential risk. And this is probably part of your question. Like you can't just be so optimistic on everything, put 18 different things together that all have to win the lottery concurrently in order to make success. So you have to choose the places where you're going to be optimistic, unquestionably. We did talk a lot about it because that's where we differentiate ourselves. But then on the pragmatic level, 90 out of 99 problems are in the last problem. Never mind, I won't quote. Yes, those have to be solved pragmatically. And you can't actually just reach way out there with your optimism to get them done. So there's a healthy balance, but I don't think there's a lot of room for pessimism, or actually there's not a lot of room for patience either. Like you have to be impatient, you have to be optimistic, and you have to apply some pragmatism to the normal problems.
Sam, do you want to take a crack at that one, or are you good?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could add would come circling back to before is really, for me, it's just being optimistic about the end goal and kind of unwavering in that way. But then everything else on a more day-to-day basis has to be, data-driven, and you have to look at it more through, a logical lens, without any emotion, not looking at pessimism or optimism. And if you go and you have a terrible pitch, they don't like it, you have to sit back and say, okay, why? And you have to dissect that. And then there are some bits of learning, and you can make it better. And then you believe at the end that you're going to get there. So it's not an issue. But you have to, on a day-to-day basis, use a really pragmatic approach, or else if you're always kind of clouded by optimism, you're just going to make mistakes and you're never going to get there.
Great question. Thank you. Other questions right here in the middle?
Thank you guys so much for this. So you talked earlier about innovation and, basically trying to find, somebody says it can't be done, but you think it can, and that's innovation. Well, I'd like to ask about innovation from a business perspective. How are you being innovative right now in figuring out supply chain issues, especially, with electric vehicles and, the chip shortage and everything? How are you approaching that?
So this is, I'm not claiming that this is innovative. I think it's just kind of a fundamental principle. It's the realization that that in this environment, we each have to do more as a company, and you reach a little bit deeper into the vertical element, and you take a little bit more control. And so I guess the way that I think about it and talk about it within our business is nobody cares as much as we do. We think we are the most important customer of that chip supplier or battery supplier or whatever. Nobody cares as much as we do. So out of the gates, you're going to do it yourself if you can. But if somebody else has a wealth of experience, a product on the shelf, or some intellectual property that can overcome that strong pull of caring, then you can even consider having somebody else do it. And there are places where that's the case, right? So in this kind of weird supply chain world that we're in, of course there's going to be times when you have to do, obsolescence and other type engineering practices to make sure that you can sustain the product or continue R&D. But as a general rule, the line just shifts a little bit further over to friction from relying on somebody else. And that just it's just a mental check before assuming that because somebody else does it, they're better at it. The give a damn matters a lot.
Sam, anything you want to add?
Yeah, that's very well put. And I think it defines the successful startups in the hardware space, especially, is exactly that. When you're competing against big established players, we care a lot about the products we're developing. The supplier, not so much. They care about their biggest customer. We're not that as a startup. So you've got to remain really agile. I think any startup that's succeeding in this space, and Tesla did this extremely well, is retain control over as much as possible so you can be agile and you can pivot. 7 months ago, we had no microchips to be able to build a vehicle, and we redesigned 26 boards in our vehicles. And we could only do that because it was our design to a completely different chip architecture. And I think a lot of companies have done that in the past years, and they're the ones that have been able to kind of come over this hump, and especially in the electronic supply chain, because they were able to be agile like that.
Great, thank you both. Do we have another question out there? I saw Greg. Oh, okay, there we go.
To go in a less fun direction, I think it's going to get really hard to raise funds soon, if not already. A lot of startups are cutting folks. What do you guys think about going forward, so the macroeconomic, how that's going to affect you? I mean, it's like a supply chain question, but with money. So What are you thinking about that and being prepared for maybe a little bit of a dark period going forward?
Yeah, I mean, our mentality is go big or go home. It's like we're in it to go after it, and to turn into a cockroach and try and like make it through this little dip is a bad strategy in my opinion. Like if somebody wanted to invest in that kind of business, they would have gone and invested in mutual funds. That's not the startup world. So I would say that yes, that is true. The cool thing is, by the way, in all this like black cloud news of the markets, whatever, the thing that has maintained a really strong position is investment in green technologies. It's consistently good across all these ups and downs since January. So, from a pragmatic standpoint, I don't feel like we are going to be nearly as affected as the pure tech companies that are trying to do something that is less long-term meaningful. But at the same time, like we were trusted by our investors and our employees and our communities to create something. And lying in wait and trying to ride it out is not creating something. That's just like trying to hold on to the back of the wagon.
We're in a different industry, but we use the phrase play to win, don't play not to lose, which if you have that at the top of the spreadsheet when you're planning, you plan differently, and that's really been valuable for us. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right mindset. It's very dangerous for startups or any company when you start having the mindset about how are we cutting costs, how are we scaling down. It's kind of a death spiral, and you end up not being able to achieve the end goal. There's ups and downs in the market. It's kind of part of fundraising cycles, and it really comes down to fundamentals, and that's what you got to keep focusing on, which is build the best product at a good price, and then you have a solid business. And if you focus on that, you can kind of get through anything.
Great. So we've had the supply chain, the money supply chain. Are there other good questions out there? In the middle here.
So this is a little self-fulfilling, but I'm curious.
We love your dress.
Thank you. So for Sir Samuel, I just really wanted to find out, you gave me a little bit of an insight earlier as to why the Vermont market is intriguing to you, but we've spent decades trying to tell people, young people, not to leave our state because we have amazing jobs here, right? And companies like Beta are putting us on the map for that, and it's still taking more time. And so really, as I mentioned, I just kind of want you to broadly share with people why Vermont would be intriguing to you in terms of making your way south into the U.S. through the state of Vermont.
First and foremost, Vermont is intriguing to us. Just it's beautiful here, and it's a perfect fit for our products. And it's a very progressive state with a customer base that's just going electric before others. So it was a natural transition for us being right across the border to kind of focus some of our initial efforts here in terms of a beachhead into the United States up from Canada, with such a great culture of outdoor adventure, going electric, spending time out in the water, out in the trails with the snowmobile. So we've had a great reception from the people here, and we're really happy to be able to be showcased here and to continue expanding into the state.
And it's the cleanest state in the country to recharge an electric vehicle, which is kind of cool. And yes, exactly. Yes, more renewable here than anywhere else in the country. And the other thing, like, there's a mindset, in my opinion, in Vermont, a certain pride in being forward thinking. And it could be socially, it could be technologically. And there are tons of examples, whether you go all the way back to slavery, to gay rights, to all kinds of things where Vermonters said, you know what, I'm going to take a little pride in going out here and doing what's right before the balance of the country or the world does what's right. And I think that's also true in electric aviation, hopefully electric, snow machines and getting on the water. Like, there's a lot of good reasons that if we're going to recreate on things, that we don't want to destroy our planet doing it. And so it takes a little bit of a, I'm not going to stick to the old ways mentality and be proud of it. And you can't deny the fact that launching a new product takes some tolerance by a consumer. It's not going to have everything that the known product has to achieve a big benefit in sustainability, for example. So taking that pride in being first allows you to tip the balance and say, I'm going to take the fact that I can't just dump a can of gas in there and I have to charge it up, and weigh that against the fact that I take some pride in being a first. Never mind how awesome the product is. There's going to be some bumps in launching it. So I think Vermont's an awesome place to launch a product.
And maybe just on that note, people here might not know, but something Vermont has very much to be proud of is that the first ever electric snowmobile was delivered in Vermont, not even our home province of Quebec. So that's a great little moment in history.
Go Vermont. And I do want to actually press on your question a little bit, because I think it's a good one, because all of these accolades about Vermont, which I 100% share, and honestly way more so than ever these last few weeks given the national state of things, but it's hard to get young people to stay here and to come here for jobs. And so there are affordable housing issues. There's, those few months of the year when it's not exactly like this. How, as business leaders, do you see your roles, or are you stepping into your roles in addressing some of those broader issues that have a pretty direct impact on your ability to hire the people you need?
So I guess that's fit for me to answer first. One of the things that I think we've done well as a business to attract people is recognizing that the reason people want to come to a business like ours isn't just a fat paycheck. And we do pay really well, by the way, if anyone's looking for, no, the reason is not that, but it's on the side of that. And like, there's things that we can do here that you couldn't do in big cities. Like in our world, it's providing flight lessons. It's engaging people's families in a very positive way within the business. Like there's never somebody that we recruit to come here and we don't immediately invite the people around them that are important to them, and recognizing that that's a big part of it. And those are the people that you want in your business as well. So that's your general recruiting strategy. But we can all talk about all the good things that Vermont has, but I think globally, not global, but within like Vermont as a whole, we have like super unique access to resources as a state that you would never get in other states, through the governor, through our senators, in this small town of Burlington, like getting access for us to prime real estate on an airport that you just can't get in big cities, are all benefits to the overall business, and thus benefits to the people that commit their time and efforts to the business. And the last thing that I've found relative to my former business trying to recruit people is that now that remote work is more acceptable, the big impediments coming to Vermont, housing, whatever. One of them that comes up consistently is, I come, but my spouse can't find a job, or there's nothing there. But the fact that there's the ability to work remotely at a greater level is unblocking that thinking. And we're able to recruit people that I never thought. I think Josh is here. Josh Meislick somewhere, and we were recruiting the snot out of him, and finally his wife Annalise, or his soon-to-be wife Annalise, was able to work remotely, and that changed his ability after several tries to have him come here and work here. So it's not a big impediment to be off the beaten path anymore.
That's awesome. That's great. How about one last question? Anyone have it for us? You totally can go there. I just want to see if there's anyone else. The teacher in me is coming out. Oh, we do have a different voice. Sorry.
I'll go on this side. So I really believe in today's youth, and sometimes I think about your kids and how you're raising these like incredible children that are seeing electric vehicles as a sense of normalcy, but we haven't been there before. You guys are pioneering a whole new space. How do you feel like we can create access for more kids to enter STEM and to be in spaces that, there weren't doors before, and now you're opening for them?
So I'll take that as a compliment, and I don't know that there's a question in there, but just to kind of riff on it for a second, in a startup, if you think exclusively like a startup, you're always trying to find your next dollar, your next meal, and whatever. At some point, and I don't know when it happened for us exactly, if you portray and think long term, people believe more in your vision. You know, we're going out and we're putting in the largest net zero building east of the Mississippi here in Vermont. Huge building, geothermal, solar, all kinds of good stuff. People look at that and say, geez, they're not really acting like a startup. They're making like 25-year investments. We took a 75-year lease on the land. Like these are moves that startups don't typically make. One of those is investing in local technical schools, investing in local middle schools. Like, how is that going to return to the business? Well, it returns in the fact that people are thinking longer term and they're building a real business and they're thinking long term. So selfishly, in investing in the community and the youth in the community is going to build a brand of the business that we're here to stay. And that's a big impediment for people to get behind your business, whether it be suppliers, investors, or the government, or whatever. So that selfishly, that's really important. But personally, that's obviously really important to me because we know each other. You know, we know my kids and how we welcome our kids and other people's kids into the business all the time because I think it makes the business better, more healthy. It provides more energy. You know, we've got 83 interns this summer at the business. The energy is like sky high. Like this floor is swept constantly. It's pretty amazing. But like that investment also is, again, somewhat selfish. And it's like the unbridled thought experiment of these student engineers saying crazy, perturbing things and offering ideas that never would have come out if we didn't have people. So, you know, this concept of youth, like it's probably just a mindset, but in this case, it's beneficial to the business to have that mindset within the business and even right down to high school interns. And I'm not talking about just like graduate level folks. So yeah, it's important to us. It's important to include the families. It's important to invest long-term and get that energy in the business.
Sam, anything you want to add?
I think on the STEM specific, it's really important to be able to, you know, get people excited and to show what's possible by going into kind of STEM career paths. A lot of people often, if you're in high school, you're thinking that's just, you know, it's just math, it's just biology, it's chemistry. You don't really get exposed to what you can actually build with these things. And it's about getting the products and getting the story told at those earlier stages when people are making life decisions and showing, you know, wow, you can build something like this if you go and it's possible. And I think that's true for entrepreneurship as well. When I was in university, I had like no mindset of becoming an entrepreneur. I was happy, you know, being an electrical engineer, and I was going to go work at Tesla, and that was what I was going to do. And then one day a speaker came in and talked about how he created this business, and he showed how it was possible. Like, whoa, you can do that. I didn't even know it was an option. And I think that's what we got to do across the, you know, different levels of education, not just for STEM, but for entrepreneurship and any other business path, and really show what's possible beyond just the academics.
Yeah, I think that's awesome and right. And I think that, you know, inspiring students who are considering a path down science, technology, math, that the outcome of that is not sitting in a cubicle doing calculus. It can be really fun, and we have the fortunate we're fortunate in that our products by themselves are inspiring. They're fun. People want to fly. People want to ride jet skis or snowmobiles, and if you draw the line between focusing on those things and having the opportunity to create these things, you get an inherent affinity and inspiration to say, yeah, if I'm an engineer, I can work on something pretty neat. You know, you wouldn't have the same thing if you made pumps for sewer treatment plants, right? It just wouldn't have the same buzz and the energy. So I think we're both contributing to that by showing the students and whoever else comes into our business, you know, this is the outcome of math.
That is a great phrase to end on. This is the outcome of math. But also, I think perturbing and inspiring questions, I think was the phrase you used. So many great words to live by. Thank you all for the questions. I think I'm safe in saying that you'll both hang out for a bit here if anyone wants to come and ask any other questions. So again, this is the what was this called? What was this session called? It was this great session with these two great guys. That's what we're going to call it. Part of the Sea Change sessions. And thank you all so much for hanging out on this beautiful beach, asking such great questions. Looked like people were really engaged. And above all, thanks to both of you for your great work in the world and for being able to talk about it with such passion. And you truly are both renewable energy sources in yourselves. So thank you for that.
As are you. Thank you. Again for our host.